Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Master's Apprentice, learning to be like Jesus. My name is Caleb,
And I'm Dustin.
and we're glad to be diving back in today. We've been talking about spiritual practices, spiritual disciplines, which are tools given to us that we might be able to be with Jesus and be closer to Jesus, and by His grace and the power of the Holy Spirit, to be like Jesus and to live out our lives like our Master. So, we're diving into the next one today, which some may consider controversial, one way or another. Also, besides it being controversial, might be one of the harder ones to accomplish in a practical kind of way, because it's a huge commitment to be able to do. So, great benefit, but a massive commitment to it. So if it's not controversial to you, it'll at least be, oh man, how am I supposed to do that? So does that make sense, Dustin? I feel like that's what it's a big one we're dealing with today.
Yeah, a lot of issues potentially.
So
Not only, well, let's name it. So we're going to be talking about Sabbath today, and there's a lot of issues. So one is that even for us? Should we even be talking about this?
Mm-hmm.
And if you get to the point where you feel like whether it's commanded or recommended, however you come down on it, like once you get past that, then it's the actual, how do I do this?
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of roadblocks to this, and I'm not sure exactly where you want to start. It
Sure.
probably would be best to start with the first one, but just know that we're going to try to make this as simple as possible because we don't want to spend
Yes.
a ton of time on it. But
Yep.
we do want to at least acknowledge those may be the things that you're facing when we're proposing this idea of Sabbath.
Yeah. And I can lay down a definition for us,
yeah.
and we'll see if it'll hold true or not. But what I've written down is Sabbath is a day of ceasing from work for the purpose of helping us to trust Jesus. And the wording there is really on purpose. Sabbath is a day of ceasing from work for the purpose of helping us to trust Jesus. Some of the notes I've written down is like Jesus obviously was a Jewish man. And he, Sabbath was a part of his routine. Now, he did it differently than some of the rules and regulations of the day that had been put on it. And he had to straighten some people out on that one, which, if you're familiar with the Jesus story, you kind of see that happening of him like, hey, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. But Sabbath was part of Jesus' routine, part of his disciples' routine, as being Jewish men as they were. And let's see. I'm looking at my notes and I'm trying to see what parts I want to say or not say now.
Well,
I'll say this, is that there's a sense in which I would argue that Sabbath is part of ceremonial law, is something that I would argue, and there's debate of like, hey, how can you really mark stuff that way? But what I mean by that is it had to do with marking a distinction between Israel and other nations and their covenant with God. But that aside, no matter how you want to label that, put that aside for a moment. That's why I had to think about how I wanted to word this. I want to make sure we're focused in our conversation today. It was also intended for the good of those who kept it.
yeah.
Like, you can see this in the Old Testament. You even see them resting their crops every 7 years, right? You have,
Yeah.
and everybody gets a break. Like this is the thing that happens, and it's not just for that like law part of it. It's also for their good, and that's why I think Jesus said, "Hey, this was made for man. Like what? Like this is made
Right.
for your good." So. So one last thing I'll add about that from me is that I would argue, and there's once again different opinions on this, that there isn't necessarily an obligation or an expectation from Jesus or the apostles that we should have a 24-hour day of ceasing from work. But what I would say is that it's a spiritual discipline worth considering as a means of increasing our trust in Jesus, enjoying Jesus, enjoying the people around you, being like Jesus, and helping us less consumed with the endless pursuits of the world. So as much as I would like want to, I don't want to err on like this side of it being like this command or something that, oh, you have to do like this. Well, I
Right.
don't want to err on that side of it, but I also want to say there's a lot of good reasons in our
Yeah.
current culture, in our current what we've been taught even growing up of what we need to be doing or not be doing. I think that Sabbath is probably more needed than ever in a culture that worships work and self accomplishment. And so I'll put that little bug in there to get us going.
Yeah.
So if I can, it was one last time. Sabbath is a day of ceasing from work for the purpose of helping us to trust Jesus, and like I just said, also enjoy Jesus. And that would be kind of
Yeah.
my way of presenting that.
Yeah, and I would also argue before we jump into the other part, before there was a law, before there was the 10 commandments, we have Jesus, or let me be specific. We have God the Father who created the world and everything in it in 6 days, and then on the seventh rested.
Yes,
And so we see from the very beginning this rhythm, this pattern that God had set.
absolutely.
And while we know that he did not need the rest, he set it there for an example. That was before the law was given. He had
Right.
done that. And so while it may not be a requirement, while it may not be a command that we should follow, we're not going to get into all of that today,
Right.
but it is still a helpful thing. It is still a beneficial thing. And as you said, Sabbath was made for man. Jesus even said that, not
Right.
man for the Sabbath. And so if that's the case, then there is benefit, there is good to keeping the Sabbath.
Right.
And that's kind of what I think we should probably focus on today.
Absolutely. If I can add one nuanced thing to that, you said something that rang a bell. It's a short book, but I've been like working my way through it slowly. Is The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis, and he wasn't addressing Sabbath at all, but there was something he said that you reminded me of that would apply to this in theory. Is that as humans, right? We are subject to natural law, like the way that things are supposed to be, the way that God designed them, right? So we are bound to that, and we can try to go against it, but it doesn't usually go very well for us. We can't just come along and make up our own ideas of like, oh, it'll be totally fine if I step off of this cliff. I won't fall. That's not how it works. We're bound to these things, and we can push against them. So there's a sense in which you said like there's this rhythm that God seems to make us a part of creation. These 6 days of work, this one day of rest, and as a culture, that natural rhythm, we push against it. We push against that idea heavily of resting, and I think we're
Yeah.
seeing the bad results of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, it clicked in my mind of Lewis talking about it's
Yeah.
our responsibility as humans, and he wasn't even like he was making a larger argument about something else, but like the general idea here is as humans, what we should be doing is try to get into that natural flow of natural law, like functioning as we were designed to function as we exist, as
Yeah.
opposed to going against it.
Right.
And if it's in principle, if it seems that God created the universe with a rhythm to where it's healthy, where we're working really hard and resting in Jesus as we're working really hard for 6 days, and it's right and healthy and good to just enjoy Him for one of 7 days and enjoy the creation and enjoy each other and be with Jesus, And if we're always pushing against that, like, that's
Yeah.
it'll wear on us really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can just look at our society and see it's a 24/7 kind of world, and working all the time, no stopping, you know. And I'm not saying that if you're in a spot where you have to work like that, then that's wrong, but I'm just saying that is the reality of our
Right.
world, where it is multiple jobs. It's
Right.
working,
And
12, 13 hours a
yeah.
day.
And even if that's what you have to do right now, it's not ideal. Like,
Yeah, you
it's
feel
not. I
it.
mean, those that are having to work more hours than are healthy know it's not healthy. That's just the current season that they're in to make ends meet. So,
Yeah.
we kind of even know it is what I'm getting. Like, even if
Yeah.
it's some some people would have. I think of like entrepreneurs, or think of any of the big sensational like go-getter inspirational speakers, or think of like, I don't know, Gary V, or whoever you
Sure.
want to, you think of millionaires or billionaires who are just like, never take a day off, always trying to find the next thing, never waste a moment to make money, never
Yeah.
just always trying to build, or never waste a moment to improve yourself, like doing this, doing that. And that kind of speaks to us, like, yeah, we're going to get after it and do all those things. And I'm such a big proponent of hard work. Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
absolutely a big proponent of taking care of if you have a family, like caring for your family and making sure that their needs are met and making sure they're in a good position, and all of those things. Absolutely. But it's a problem if we're married to that idea, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, there's so even people who wouldn't have to work 7 days,
Right.
or they do it too,
Yeah.
because they live for it. It's like they glorify the hustle, I think, is a great way to
Yeah.
put it. Like, man, I'm gonna just glorify
They
this
do.
whole thing, and make fun of the idea of taking a break,
Yeah.
or make a mockery of the idea of resting. A terrible thing is, I'll rest when I'm dead type of. Have you guys ever heard anybody say that? Yeah, I'll sleep when I'm dead. That's a terrible idea. We were designed to sleep.
Yeah.
Jesus took naps. I gotta get a T-shirt. I know there's T-shirts out there. Jesus took naps. Okay, so our bodies are designed to get rest. Our bodies are. I mean, it's as goofy as thinking, Dustin, I'm never gonna drink water. I love soda, and it's the only thing I like. And so I'm going to have it for breakfast and lunch and dinner. I'm going to drink soda throughout the day. If I'm thirsty, I'm going to drink soda.
Yeah.
You can do it. You might even have all kinds of wonderful experiences while you're doing it. You might even be making money while you do it. You might even be putting food on the table while you're doing it. But eventually that will catch up to you. You
Yeah.
can't just decide, I don't need water. In the same way, we can't just decide, I don't need rest. Now,
And
Sabbath is
I
a
think
specific kind of rest, but yeah.
I, what we're kind of getting at, and this is one of the benefits of the Sabbath, is reminding ourselves again that we have limits.
Mm-hmm.
And we really don't like that idea. We fight against it. We want to prove that we are limitless, but it's just not true. We're not robots. We are not machines. We are not designed to be on the go all the time.
No.
And contextually, when the children of Israel were given this law, the Ten Commandments, not too long before, they had just come from Egypt.
Yeah. Where they were
and they
forced to
were
work every day.
definitely working every day,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so this was a gift. This was, hey, it's not about what you produce. You have limits. This is this is about taking a day every 6 days and resting and understanding that this is a good thing. It's okay to rest. It's okay not to produce.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was, partially a correction of what they had been doing for so long in Egypt of working all the time. And now God says, no, no, no. You work 6 days, work hard, but this last day, enjoy me, trust me. Because that's another part is trusting God to provide. They had
Hmm.
to. You
Hmm.
know, they didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have a Walmart. They had to go and find their
No.
food, right, and all that
Right.
stuff. They had to trust God would provide that extra day's worth on the 6th day and trust that it would be enough for them and their family for the next day. And so part of Sabbath is also trusting that God's going to provide and that it's not all on you to to make sure everything's going to work out.
Yep.
God's got this. It's a
Yep.
reminder that we're not the ones in control, that God is, and that He's going to take care of us. We don't have to run this rat race, uh,
Right.
right? Like He's got us. We're gonna have our needs met, right?
Absolutely. And something that we might talk about more like in part two of this conversation. I encourage you guys to join us for that because we kind of dive into some more of the ins and outs and what that might look like. But I just want to go ahead and make a note of it now, and we'll talk more about it in the next part, is that in our context, which is so much different than Israel's context, rest might look different for different people depending on what kind of job you have. Keep in mind, like when you're looking at a culture where everybody was farmers, yeah, everybody was gatherers,
Yeah,
every member of the family was working throughout the day just so you could eat for the day. Like, even not that long ago, even like you don't have to go back that
yeah,
far. If you just go before the modern age of technology, electricity and refrigeration and all that, every member of the family was doing something at any given point in the day just for the eating,
yeah,
just for survival. You can't run through the McDonald's. You can't just like
yeah,
grab a snack out of the refrigerator. Like, nope, we have to do all this work for this one meal. And then we have to start over again for the next one, right? And so our culture is so much different, so much different. A lot of people, a lot of us, work in front of computer screens. A lot of us work in a digital world. A lot of us work from home. Obviously there's still like, and then there's like physical labor jobs that are like way more intense than even like
yeah,
old school farming because it's just like good night. Or maybe you work in a factory, which is a whole other type of different setting. Maybe you work with people all day. Maybe you work in isolation all day. It just, man, we have such a melting pot of careers and jobs and ways of meeting ends. Or then you have like the hustle end of that. Maybe you are an Uber driver or you're or Lyft or whatever you use for that, or Door Dashing or Instacart. So that and then you have that, and then you're dependent on tips to really make any money. So like now you're having all these interactions. You're so now you're a driver, right? So now you're
right.
your not resting time is you driving and going and shopping or whatnot. Anyway, I want to give all these examples to say that because of that, our rest will look different based on what you do to put food on the table.
Yeah,
And so, once again, we'll talk more about it in the next part, but this is a part of this base conversation too, I think, is a part of the idea of resting or Sabbathing is to not be doing the things you're normally doing those other days of the week trying to make your ends meet. So like
right.
if your job is driving, when you're off of work for a day, you don't want to be spending the day driving if you can avoid doing that, right? If you look at screens all day for your job, you probably don't want to spend a day of rest binge watching your favorite show, because that really isn't rest. You've been looking at screens all day. A different type of
Yeah.
entertainment, but it might be, maybe probably should look like a different rest. Or if you're around people all the time, or you're doing a physical labor job, or you're in a factory 10, 12 hours a day, maybe your rest does look like you're watching, your favorite show on television, with your legs up with some ice packs on. I mean, like, I don't, whatever.
Yeah.
That could look different, but I like this general principle that we're getting at is the idea of taking one day where you're not going to be married to the hustle.
Yeah.
Even if you're like, ooh, man, but I need to make more money. It's like, I'm going to trust God with this one. I'm going to rest. And maybe I'm going to pause here a moment, Dustin, because, I think we've made all kinds of caveats and clarities about,
Yeah.
we understand if you're in a situation where you've got to do this to make ends meet.
Yeah.
But there's a part of that, you got to come to a point where, even if that's where you're at, you've got to find those moments to Sabbath and to rest.
Yeah.
Even if you've got to hustle really hard and do it, you've still got to find a place for it, because life is more than just that.
Yeah.
And I was going somewhere else with that, and then I went that way.
Well, I was gonna build on that. I mean, because our cultures are different, theirs would allow, to a certain extent, to have a day. It was not as busy. I mean, it was busy, hard work, but it wasn't
Right.
as busy, distracting, multiple things going here like we do now. So when we're talking about Sabbath, it may not be a full day.
Absolutely.
Once again, this is a practice.
Right.
So if you are in a scenario in which you're a single parent, got kids, you've got to provide, and cost of living is super high. Inflation has got carton of eggs at $6, whatever
Right.
the case.
Right.
You have to work multiple jobs. There is a balance, obviously, between God providing and you having to go and do the work. I understand that. And when we're talking about Sabbath, if you cannot physically do a 24-hour day, what can you do?
Exactly.
What can you do? And it is a season. It won't be like that for the rest of your life, right? What can you do in this season?
Yeah.
Is it a few hours of rest?
Right.
Is it half a day of rest? What can it be?
Yeah.
So don't get locked into that one day idea. It doesn't have to be if it can't be. It would be great.
Absolutely.
But if it can't be, what can you do?
Right. You're not where I was originally meaning to go with that, Dustin. I just kind of like took this random turn, but I think it's important for us to do that. Before I say the other thing, I was going to say, like, rest might be you taking your daughter or your son to the park and pushing them on the swing.
Yeah, very much.
That could be so. In other words, you're not, all right, go play, and you're working on your phone, or like trying to or doing a bad version of rest. Your child's playing and you're scrolling on Instagram or on TikTok. It's like, maybe there's a place for that, but the better rest would be kind of interacting with your family and like pushing your kid on the swing and playing tag with them for a couple hours, because you have that morning off of work, or you have that afternoon off of work. You know what? I'm not going to go, yes, I have some laundry that needs to be done, or yes, I have this deadline, but for this moment right now, I'm going to Sabbath from it. I'm going to break from it, and I'm going to enjoy these things that are right in front of me, these moments, my children, my God. What I wanted to speak into that was this, Dustin. For the overwhelming majority of people that are in this where Sabbath just sounds like, oh, I wish. I want to say this. You're not lazy. People might try to make you feel like you're lazy for taking a day off of work. But you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. And that's kind of what I wanted to speak into as well. Is like, if you've been so ingrained of thinking that you have to hustle all the time, and that resting is bad or lazy. No, it's not. Sabbath is saying, I trust God and I want to enjoy him and enjoy the people around me to his glory and for refreshing of life. And then you can go back to work refreshed, ready to go. Working as hard as you ever have. It's not lazy.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to encourage on that side, because some people think of it as laziness. It's not lazy. If it's built into the fabric of who we're designed to be, it's not lazy. It's just a necessary factor of life. And let me also, we haven't said this specifically, Dustin. We said the rest can maybe look like part of the day, right? Which, once again, we'll talk more details in part 2 of this. And maybe it can't be every week.
Yeah.
Right? We want to say that too. You have these best case scenarios of how you could run a practice or run a discipline. And of course, best case scenario is that after 6 days of work, you rest one and you don't do any work on that day, right? That's the ideal. And there's a sense in which maybe we can work towards that. But maybe it's, okay, I'm planning a Sabbath at the end of this month on this day. I already asked off work for this specific day. Here's the plan for that rest.
Yeah.
And you execute it. Maybe it looks like that. And that's a huge win. And that's a huge way of being able to implement that principle. So in the sense of this being a hard one, or maybe a one that people are critical of, it's more feasible than you think. If you're thinking in a broader sense, okay, it's what, today's February. Well, I can't say that because this is going to come out a different time. Whenever this video is out, it's like 1 month from now or 6 weeks from now.
Yeah.
I'm planning a day. This is when that's going to happen. And maybe it's already incorporated your schedule. Maybe it's already a day off. But maybe it's a day that you'd normally do your side hustle. So like, let's say you normally work, whatever your regular schedule is, but then maybe you're also doing a DoorDash or Instacart or something else on the side to make ends meet. That week, you're not going to do it. you're gonna Sabbath instead, just that one time. So anyway.
I know we're probably getting close on time.
We are.
I do want to turn it though to make sure that we hit where it needs to. And when we're talking about the Sabbath and this rest, while those are benefits, that is not the ultimate reason.
Mm-hmm.
The ultimate reason is to be with God, and I would argue it is to enjoy what He has given us.
Mm-hmm.
And to take time and praise, thank, worship, whatever the word is you'd like to use.
Yeah.
That is what this is designed for. It's take a pause from the hustle and bustle. Take a pause on producing and look to see what God has done. What has God given you? And then to look back and say, God, thank you so much for this gift of family. Yeah. Or thank you, God, so much for this gift of the game of golf that I can enjoy today. Like whatever it is that, however you are resting, it is an opportunity to thank God for what He has done. It's an opportunity to pause and thank Him for the gifts in your life, to worship him, and to spend time with him. And that's what this is ultimately about. It's not just about resting from the work, which it is. This is turning to God and being thankful, worshiping, and spending time with him.
Yeah.
Because if it's just a day off where you just hang out and binge watch Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, that's probably great for you if you're, working at a factory for, 45, 50 hours a week and you just kind of enjoy yourself and take some time. That's great. But these disciplines and these practices are there ultimately to make us more like Jesus, spend time with him. And so if we're not doing that, if we're not using that day for those purposes, that it's just a day off. It's not a practice.
That's right.
So I want to make sure that we made that clear.
Absolutely. I think that's really good. It's in regards to our direct conversation it's also spending extra time with God in his presence. Yeah. Spending extra time in his word. And in a way that is in a freeing kind of way. Because it's a day that you're hopefully going to enjoy and rest, maybe sleep in a little extra, enjoy the family and friends around you, but you're also just going to enjoy Jesus. And grow in trusting him of, hey, Lord, I know there's a lot of other stuff that I could be doing right now, but I am choosing to spend this time with you and this day enjoying creation and praising you for it. And overall, as difficult as it may do to try to plan this, whether it's a part of a day or a whole day, whether it's every week or whether it's once a month, whatever that looks like on the practical side, which we're about to dive into here in a moment, whatever that looks like, the benefit spiritually and physically massively outweighs how difficult or complicated or frustrating of a practice that it can be to implement. Any other thoughts there, Dustin, before we head out of part one?
No, I think that works. We'll
cool.
See you over there in part two.
Yeah, sounds good. See you guys over there.